Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be talking about some rumors here with the head coaching gig. We're going to talk a little bit about GM as well, and just some developments and things that are being discussed. There's not a whole ton that's happened since the last game. No one's been fired. We did see the Saints head coach fired this morning, and we saw the Raiders offensive staff get fired, quite a few of them, including the OC. Nothing has happened in Jacksonville, and I'll just hit on it for a quick moment again. We talked about this in the game recap from week 9. It is really just a matter of time until these things happen. You can be skeptical of that because, the history of this franchise, they screw everything up, right? Generally under Shad Khan. But at the end of the day, there's no world where they can keep around Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke, and there's not enough incentive, I think, to Shad Khan to just blow it up right now. I think he would need more to do it. So it's a matter of time. And we're already hearing stuff about this team reaching out to people who might be available to coach or vice versa. And a lot of things coming in from that. We're going to talk about that. And I'll just be straight with you guys. This video is going to be mostly about Ben Johnson because when you look at the coaches available, not 100%, not 100% of people are going to necessarily agree, but the vast majority of people, including myself, are going to see Ben Johnson as the top candidate. So that's where this is obviously going to be going. Ben Johnson, if you don't know anything about him, you should learn more about him. He's a phenomenal offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, huge part of their success, and just looks like he's going to be the next great head coach in the NFL. Could you be wrong? Of course, right? That you're always going to have a risk involved. But if you're talking about investments this team can make, this is one of the best ones that you could. So we're going to dive into this, and all this stuff is coming from the same person. I want to give him a shout out, E_Dylan on Twitter. If you're not following him on Twitter, for the love of God, go look him up and follow him. And when you do it, don't do the one that's 2 underscores, because when you do that, you're going to get screwed because it'll pop up here. That's not the right one. That's a fake account. I know a lot of people get tricked by that, so don't go to that one. But you get a lot of inside news from the Jaguars, things going on behind the scenes, and it's a good way to stay kind of in the connect with what's really going on, and it's been great to follow for years for me as a fan and helped us kind of be prepared for a lot of things. So with that said, our first thing here, rumors that have been said, Ben Johnson talking about where he wants to go, because that's the big conversation we've had, is he going to prefer Jacksonville over other locations? Are there going to be other teams that might be set up better? And so the two that we're hearing is Cincinnati and Jacksonville, mainly because of the smaller market, right? The expectations. And I think you see from Ben Johnson and the lack of a decision to move on the last 2 off seasons, that he wants to go somewhere that's a really good situation, that's secure, that he's not going to have to worry about getting fired right off the spot. He's not going to have to worry about, massive, crazy expectations, right? I think these are things that you can say are important to him. And that's where you see this last part of this, where for Jerry Jones, an owner that's going to be in a situation where it's not really going to fit all that, you're going to have to pay him a ton of money. And that's not going to work. It's going to be straight, right? I don't see a world where Ben Johnson really considers going to the Dallas Cowboys. There's going to be teams that just don't make as much sense. Philadelphia was one that I felt like the situation might be better, but you're going to have those high expectations as well there. And that might be a little bit of a concern here. Not that, it's a matter of like Johnson doesn't think he can do it. It's just you want to have the best possible situation for yourself, and that's having time to actually build the team the way you want it to go, right? So Cincinnati and Jacksonville, right? They make a lot of sense. You've got your franchise quarterback in place. You can debate who's better. I mean, at this point, it's Burrow. Let's be clear. But these are teams with talent, right? Teams that have really good players on them that have underperformed recently that are going to be a really good opportunity for someone to go coach, and not really going to have to involve this complete teardown and rebuild. I think Jacksonville maybe needs more of that, but it's not like there's no pieces here, right? There's a lot of good players that you have to work with here. So, talking about some other things that have been said. One thing you're going to love to hear is that he's not going to work with Trent Baalke, right? And this is something that we've been hearing about from really everyone who's been contacting the Jaguars, at least this is the rumor, that no one is willing to work with Trent Baalke. If you feel like Shad Khan wants to keep Trent Baalke if he can, he's not going to have the option to. Unless you want to go hire Bill O'Brien, who I don't even know if he would want to work with Trent Baalke. It's not going to happen, right? No one is willing to do this. It took them out of a head coach candidate years ago in, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, Byron Leftwich from Tampa Bay, because he didn't want to work with Trent Baalke. It's the same thing here, right? You've got the same issues over and over with him. And, well, I think that, Trent Baalke's has hits, hasn't been good enough, right? So, I mean, this is where you get, right? And it's not surprising that, we're not going to have him working with Trent Baalke or wanting to continue that with him. And you see below, talking about the likelihood that Baalke would be gone. It's going to happen, right? I just don't see a world where he's with Jacksonville next year. If he was, no one's attending the games. Who's gonna root for this team, right? There's nothing left to root for. Now, going to our next thing here, just noting a big difference between Jacksonville and Cincinnati, right? Jacksonville is going to be in a much better situation to pay for Ben Johnson. As much as I doubt the salary is the primary factor to Ben Johnson for his job, I do think that it's going to be relatively important. And Cincinnati historically has an owner that is not wanting to spend a lot of money. So you're looking at this, and it's like, you got Shad Khan, who he might not be smart about where he's putting his money, but he's willing to spend, right? We have done a ton of this recently. And for Cincinnati, really the only player they've done it on was Joe Burrow, because what can they do, right? Like, they can't just let Joe Burrow go. So that's just naturally the way it's going to go. But that is going to be one advantage that Jacksonville has over Cincinnati. But regardless, you get a little concerned, right? Like, you want the Bengals to win out the best that they can. You want them to make the playoffs. You want your competition for the best head coach candidate in this cycle, which I believe is Ben Johnson. You can tell that pretty clearly. You want the competition to suck, right? You don't want another place out there that could possibly be as good as your place, right? And Jacksonville has a lot of things that work to its advantage when we're talking about Ben Johnson. So this is one of those things to note as a difference. Just other things here, other names that have been thrown around. Mike Vrabel, Joe Brady are two names that have been mentioned in the organization. Nothing too big there, but those are a couple other ones to keep your eyes on. And then just the final thing here, some GM candidates that, might move with Ben Johnson here, if he's the guy. The one to note, I think, is Ray Agnew. Coming from the Lions, he's worked with him. He's the assistant general manager. You've also got some very good names here. Ian Cunningham's worked with Ryan Poles in Chicago. You have, I think it's Mike Borgonzi, but we've at least got Borgonzi here. Coming from the Chiefs, he's been there for pretty much the entire time they've been successful. So, makes sense to bring him in. And then Gray, I don't know as much about, honestly, but coming over from the Bills. So, just some rumors here, right? And as far as credibility, if you followed him at all, you can go back and look at things that have been said. There is substance to this source, right? If there wasn't, it turned out like Pretty Ricky and it get canceled. And Pretty Ricky was was pretty trustworthy. The problem was that he basically went out and said something was for sure happening before it got confirmed, right? There's still substance to it, obviously. And there's times where things change. There are times where curveballs get thrown in. But this is where things currently stand, right? So I recommend you all follow him on Twitter. It's worth your time. I turn on notifications for everything just to make sure I'm seeing everything I need to regarding the Jaguars. Not trying to be a stalker, but information's too valuable. Now, looking at Tankathon, we're the second overall pick right now, which is absolutely disgusting. But you consider other teams here that could be in the running, right? New England probably isn't firing their head coach, although I think they should. And I just don't see how they're competitive. The roster's worse. Expectations might be higher in New England. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. New Orleans, I mean, it's cap hell there. Like, I don't even know if they're going to be able to get a competent head coach there because they basically got to tell the guy, like, we're rebuilding this thing for like 2 years. We can't spend. We can't do anything unless they want to just keep being average, which hasn't worked. That's the route New Orleans has to go down, right? If Carolina were to make a move, Ben Johnson's already denied them. That happened 2 years ago now. So I don't see how that would happen now with Carolina. I don't think that would be realistic. Cleveland, it's going to be straight. It's a shit show, right? There's a lot of teams in the NFL that are a shit show, but Cleveland, you got 2 years where you're locked in with Deshaun Watson. You can't do anything. So that's not going to make a whole lot of sense. Las Vegas, your main issue is that you don't have a quarterback in place. And you should have a high pick. You're not sure how high that is, but you've got to get a quarterback. You're going to a really tough division with the Kansas City Chiefs. And you've got a lot of building that you've got to do there, right? And I think that's probably a team that, if I had to guess what were to happen, if Pierce is gone, which I would probably say he is at this point, although I don't follow it too closely, it's probably a Bill Belichick landing spot, realistically. That or Dallas. And then, you look at the Giants, right? The Giants pretty much confirmed they're going to keep Dable around. There's no move being made there. For Miami, they just made their extension with Mike McDaniel. I don't think that's realistic. Tennessee just hired their head coach this offseason. They're not moving off him that quick. The Jets, they're just not going to be competitive enough, right? They'll be looking for a different head coach, but they don't have a quarterback. I mean, they have Rodgers, but who knows if he returns. And they're just kind of a mess right now. Don't think that's a great situation. Doesn't fit the low-key side of things as well, where you don't want to go to a big market. You don't want to go somewhere that has, like, ridiculous expectations. And you can say that same thing for Dallas as well. Then you keep going through this list, right? Cincinnati, we talked about. That's probably the most competitive one. But you hope that they're not firing their head coach. Seattle, Tampa Bay, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I think those teams pretty clearly aren't going to be hiring a head coach. And then you get to Chicago, and you can make an argument, I guess. Because apparently he was interested in this job last year. However, the vast amount of resources have been spent. They've been invested. That is something that he loses, right? Because that's the whole idea of why you buy in, right? Yeah, all these resources to build the team you want. You get to build the team you want to, right? In the way that you want to. That's pretty much been done. So Chicago may not be as appealing now. Plus, if the Lions are going to go win a Super Bowl or make a big run, do you think Ben Johnson decides to actually bail on them for a division rival? I'm not so sure, right? You go through the rest of this list, what other teams are making moves? I go through this whole thing. Philadelphia is probably the only one that makes any sense to me. And they're 6-2, right? Like, I don't think they're making a move. And if they do, doesn't really fit everything that Johnson wants. So it kind of leaves you in a situation where I would say that Jacksonville's the best shot. I think it's the most realistic. for Ben Johnson. I think it's the best fit. I think that you get your quarterback, you get a lot of talented pieces, you get a lot of resources, and you get time, right? You get the time that you need to build this team the way you want to, and you get to do it your way, right? And that's what's important at the end of the day. So here's our little rumor mill video, just talking about where things are. But that's all I've got for you. Let me know who you want as head coach, what you think of all this. Like I said, definitely make sure to go follow him on Twitter. You can find the handle all throughout this video. But that's what I've got. Want to shout out our channel members as well. Premier Nasir 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, and Brian Foster. But thank you all for joining. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.